we'll pretty much be taking a break from talking about Acolyte this week because I actually have not watched last week's episode, even though I'm pretty much caught up on it because it's impossible not to be because everybody else is talking about it.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
caught up on it though. I watched the
did you
last two.
you watch 3 and 4? Dang.
Yeah.
I'll probably 5 comes out
Okay.
tomorrow, so I'll probably just do 4 and 5 back to back.
One of my biggest complaints with this last episode of House of Dragon is that they really don't nail the twin dynamic as well as the acolyte does.
I know, right? The Battle of the Twins.
Yeah.
Um, man, it is still bad. I
It
am.
is worse than bad. Bad would be good.
You're right. It's not the right description for it. I don't. I just don't know. It's almost like we need a new word, you know. And we've talked for a long time. It's like we're past the bottom of the barrel. Like we have
Is it
hit.
worse than the Rings of Power? You think?
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's a good. I
I
never thought I would say that, but
I
I think
know.
there's a good argument to be made that it's worse
I
than the
think
Rings
it
of
is. I
Power.
think Rings of Power and Star Wars has been relatively even. I keep saying this to everyone, but I will watch Andor at some point. So Andor being excluded because I know people actually do like it. Slash, I have not seen it yet, or all of it yet. But that being excluded or being potentially being considered an exception. Yeah, I think they've been kind of on even ground. Like they've both done a lot of work to destroy what came before it, even though there's a lot of people that I think are that I at least think are quite clever online. And then every once in a while, one of them will be like, "Wait, Obi-Wan Kenobi was bad," and you're like, "Oh, we're not at a full consensus about some of the previous Star Wars stuff."
Yeah, I think it's
Like,
so much of when there's so much bad content, people just want to like stuff, and especially movies and shows and different IPs that were part of their childhood. It's
yeah,
easier to have those rose-colored glasses on there and be like, "Oh, I'm seeing this character again in this world again."
fair enough.
And I get it. I mean, and I think that's where
Nostalgia.
a lot of it centers on. Whereas over time, they'll get to a place where they see it doesn't hold as much value.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't age as well as like Lord of the Rings did, the trilogy.
What was that quote from Dwight Schrute where he says something like nostalgia is the greatest weakness, second only to the neck, or something like that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I think about that quote quite a bit actually when it comes to this stuff because you're spot on at least to some degree. Is that in the same way that for a while I was blinded, back in 2015 with episode 7. Was it 7, right?
Yes.
You're built up on all the hype. You're hoping to see things move forward. There's stuff that maybe you're not totally okay with, but you're like, okay, let's see where they go with the next one and kind of like see the bigger picture, which I think it's what we're doing with this. It's what we've done with House of the Dragon since the very beginning. I think, like,
Hmm.
to be fair, it's a little different because of the end of Game of Thrones, but at the same time, we're like, okay, like, seems to be good so far. Like, some stuff that's like, I don't know, but like, let's just. Some of it, I'm like, okay, maybe we need to wait until the whole season comes out to sort of see the direction that it's headed in. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit of benefit of the doubt that can be given. I'll talk a bit about that with Rhaenyra tonight. But
Yeah,
yeah,
this one was a mixed bag for me.
I agree. I'm like,
Like I liked it. I'm it's still a good and solid episode, but more of it, I should say like this, more of a mixed bag than
yeah,
episode 1 was.
yeah, agreed. And there's some stuff in there. We can get this out of the way. Like the second introduction of new characters, the blacksmith, and then the 2 sailors. Kind of weird, just like out of place a little bit.
Yeah.
The way that
I think that
they
I
weaved
think
it
the
in.
Sailor one was more out of place than the first one,
Oh, you
but
mean
the
like
first
for
one was still
episode 1 with them
no
or with the because I was
for
because
episode 2.
because there's like you mean the second one where his brother sees the dragon.
Yes.
Yeah, that. So what I'm talking about is like I think they're like back to back. If they're not back to back, it's close. Where you have the blacksmith who went to go see Aegon in the first episode, he just kind of has
Yep.
this random 2-minute scene with his family, and it just feels really out of place. Like that's something that they should have put in the first episode.
Yep.
Um,
Agreed.
and then I don't know. Well, I guess you couldn't really the sailor stuff. Like if we were gonna go deep into it, it's really weird. Like that guy is like always just at that harbor.
Yeah.
And
And
I'm sure he works there or whatever, but it was a little weird that it's like episode 1, oh, he's working on Corlius's boat and he's in that position, and then his brother comes and sees him and he's in that position. Or maybe his
no.
brother was coming. No, he was coming back. So I get that he's like sailing or whatever. It's just kind of they just because of how tight the show typically is. Um, Introducing new characters is already kind of hard, and it just feels a little weird. It feels a little weird.
Yeah. No, I think in the second episode with the was it one or I think it was two scenes with the sailors. Those were weird because Coriolis wasn't there. And so I understood it in the first episode because the interaction is happening behind a main character, one of the main characters.
Sure.
Or one of the main side characters, secondary characters, I should say. And with Lord Coriolis, it's him not being in the second episode with them in both scenes. It seemed out of place and weird. Like, don't know these characters, don't really care. And I know they're
Yeah.
setting up stuff in future episodes, and so maybe look back and think differently. But it definitely seemed like they belonged in a different episode and not this one.
It's just odd the way that it was handled. Like we got introduced to that guy before, and then we're finding out he's got a brother. But like maybe at minimum, they could have now since that character got introduced, he could have just headed back like home, and then they could have had those interactions just somewhere else. And I feel like maybe it would have landed a little bit better.
Agreed.
And then I still think the blacksmith thing should have just been in the first episode because it's
Yeah.
two extra minutes. You can have the scene where like he goes and talks to them, and then maybe you switch to some, and maybe you just like straight up show that afterwards to have like a few minutes of this one of the small folk essentially, and you're kind of seeing the effect that everything's having on them. And then you move into the next one, and then you see more of that where, Aegon is hanging all of the rat catchers and, losing a lot of the good faith that he builds up.
I very much enjoyed that scene. I thought that was
It's good, man.
spot on for his character.
Mhm.
That's something within that he would do.
I would say, honorable mention to I actually don't know what his name is, but the guy that plays Aegon.
Tell you in a second.
He was excellent in this episode.
Yeah, he's really coming on strong this year,
Which is
and
crazy.
maybe the breakout actor of the show so far.
Yeah, I could probably agree with that. He's not necessarily my favorite to watch, but the way he's exploded up the list.
Yep.
Is just like from pretty much the minute he's on screen in this episode. I'm always kind of engaged with him, which is what you want, right? It's like that's how I feel about Otto. It's how I always felt about Viserys. It's how I always feel about Daemon. So hello, Jake D. Welcome to the troll room.
His name is Tom Glenn Carney.
Tom Glenn Carney.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's been great, and it's so weird because he was just kind of there last season, and I mean, to be honest, that's sort of just the role he was playing at the time, that was the progression of his character, really, and so it is really cool to see him change so much, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing his progression throughout the season, and where he's headed. But yeah, man, why don't we just go ahead, since we're already talking about that specifically, we can go ahead and kind of get into the episode and just use that as a template for talking about some of these characters.
Let's do it.
So yeah, the opening of the episode, if this program will work for me properly, kind of starts. It starts off quite soon after the. We're spoilers, right? Like we're just going into it
Yes,
with everything. I mean, at this point, if you're listening to this one, you probably already know what happens. But yeah, spoilers.
We'll do it live.
We will be talking about the entire episode and the previous episode. Now, for those of you that don't know, neither of us have read the book. We're not going to even really delve into any of the like things we've potentially heard about the show and where it's headed, except for things that really don't matter. There's like little things here and there about like, well, I've kind of heard like this thing, but nothing that would potentially give spoilers away for like things further down the line. Like we are specifically in last season and up to the end of episode 2 is as far as we're going with any of that. Because I know some people are still sensitive about book spoilers, including me. It's really hard every time this show comes back on the air because everyone on the internet is wanting to spoil everything from the books.
Yes.
So you gotta kind of dive and get around a lot of that stuff. But we've done pretty good. A few things here and there that I'm like not sure about, and then like the books are technically have the potential to be unreliable, or this specific book and the history of it potentially is unreliable. So like they've changed some stuff already.
I just don't want to read a book like I'm already reading something fake and fictional. I don't want to read a fictional interpretation of a fictional work. Do you get what I'm saying? Like that just does not interest me.
Jake's like, a Targaryen will still be alive at the end. Which is like obvious, right? Because we know that someone from this is related to Daenerys, and that may or may not have gotten spoiled for me, but it's also kind of just impossible because like I've read the books, like you kind of are aware of like where some of this is headed.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I'm shifting around in my chair trying to get a little more comfortable. My legs are itching because of these yellow jacket bites. My ankle in particular is driving me nuts. Anyway, so yeah, we have also I was wrong about the name of the son. It was Jaehaerys. Was Helena's firstborn.
Ooh, yeah. He's the one that got it.
Yeah, and so it starts directly after that, and they're basically going in, and you know the castle is just going crazy, and it's still kind of it. This complaint will come up again at the end of the episode. I don't know. I'll just kind of, I guess, go into it right now because one of the things that I was kind of unsure about, and I think this is more of just they should have added in a piece of dialogue specifically for why there just weren't as many guards around.
Yeah.
We never really get an explanation of that, and then I don't know if like that'll come up later in the show, but it is really weird that they just weren't like, because someone in our chat had mentioned it, or excuse me, in the troll room had mentioned it, and they were like, it's probably because they don't trust a lot of people right now because they're in the middle of basically a civil war.
And so they're short-staffed.
So they're short-staffed because of that. Not only because of that, but because frickin' Larys like murdered a bunch of people. he basically killed a whole bunch of their staff for one reason or another. Maybe not the smartest move. Well, not smart for the Greens, but Larys probably has a number of different reasons that we're not aware of yet as to why he's doing the things that he's doing it.
Yeah, no, and I think Larry's whole motivation, if I had to guess, is I think he just wants to see the Targaryens as a whole crumble and be no more.
Interesting.
That's my suspicion. I don't think he's for the Greens or the Blacks, and I don't necessarily think it's only about him like maintaining some type of power and control and carving out his path. I also think a large part of that is he probably wants to get rid of the Targaryens and dragons. I bet. That's my suspicion.
Yeah. We also get confirmation as to why Viserys' model of Valeria doesn't exist anymore, and it's because his son destroys it. That dude, honestly, this hurt me more than a lot of deaths in Game of Thrones. Watching him destroy this thing, I was like, oh man! I was like, he spent so much time on that. It was like it was like an ancient Lego set. You know what I mean? He was spending so much time working on it, and it's just destroyed in a night.
This is one of Viserys's shortcomings: is that he really didn't love Aegon well. He didn't have a lot. He spent more time with that set than he did with Aegon. So I kind of understood Aegon destroying it.
Yeah, it's definitely a yeah, there's definitely some reason for that for sure. We also spend a little bit of time with Aemon this episode. Now, I'm gonna say something, and this we don't know yet. Again, this is I'll preface this as much as I can when I talk about certain characters in the show. I'm still a little unsatisfied with his characterization in the show so far. Um, I don't I don't know, and I might have mentioned this last week. I don't really know where I'm supposed to land with him at this point.
Yeah.
I,
I did not really care for that scene with him
with
and
the
that.
with the
The
prostitute.
yeah, I did like this scene.
Now,
Um,
allegedly, that is something that will that has like implications later on, for like potentially a relationship. Not with her, I don't think, but it might be giving like clues as to his kind of like personality, and like it's a bit the biggest thing
mommy
about
issues.
that. Yeah, and the biggest thing about that is that he's looking for that um, comfort that he was never given by his actual mother.
Yep.
So that's so you're getting a little bit of that in that. But yeah, well, my biggest thing with him, man, is like they seem to be setting something up with him and Damon. They were setting something up last. Like it's pretty obvious something's going to go down with them at some point, and potentially towards the end of the season is what I would guess. Because I don't think you hold that off for like a whole other season. But the thing is like I have like a strong idea of who Damon is. I don't have that for Aemon. So I'm just sort of like, is he actually as good of a fighter as like the show kind of wants us to believe, even though we've really never seen him in any sort of real combat situation. And the one time he was in, like, the one person we've seen him kill, right, was an accident technically.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting because it seemed that it was more of him not being able to maintain control of Vagar.
Yeah, that's 100% what it was, because he was telling him no, and he didn't. He lost control because
Yep.
Luke's dragon attacked him.
Yep.
Because they both lost control essentially because they're children. And so like I don't know if that is actually something that plays into it. Like I don't know if they're going for this whole thing where they're sort of trying to show like, oh, he looks so cool, he's missing an eye, he's got the biggest dragon, and then he gets into the situation and just gets absolutely obliterated because he doesn't really know what he's doing. Like you can train with Kristen Cole as much as you like, but it's and the show early on, and again, this could be part of it, and it's kind of an overarching theme for the show, I think, as far as like what they might be going for. In the very first episode, they talk about how like all of these knights and all of the people in the realm, they haven't really seen true combat. Like they haven't really seen war and like all of the gritty and grossness of it. And so I don't know if like that's going to play a role in not only his character but in characters later on, or if like there's going to be sort of that like change where it's like, oh, this is what it's really like, and then maybe that changes him some. I don't know what they're going to do, but like I feel like he's been around long enough, and I'm like I don't know what I'm supposed to think of him fully. Like there's a lot of characters that have progressed very well throughout the show, and he still feels kind of stagnant to me.
He does.
Not always.
And
He's definitely had moments, but it's one of those things that's like, I don't know, like I need a little more confirmation of like, oh dang, he might actually be trouble for the green or for the blacks.
yeah.
So, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just gonna say, like, with his character being this imposing force, I I think the scene with him with the prostitute is a bit off-putting because it seems like Eamon he's a bit more forward-thinking, and pragmatic, and wouldn't necessarily be with someone who would be so open about it in public with it. I could definitely understand him having mom issues and pursuing that, but I would think he would be a bit more discreet about it.
Well,
And I don't really care. Like,
none of them really
it
are.
just it just seems
And he has a
like
connection. He has a connection to her.
yeah, I know that. It just seems I don't. Maybe it's just the scene that I don't like him. In the the view, him looking really frail. Like I understand they're trying to show him weak. I think it's in the manner in which they show him weak
Well,
that I
see,
find distasteful.
well
That it seems like
that's
they're doing with the men,
but
but doesn't
I'm
seem like it's reverting over to the other female characters specifically. Maybe
well
I'm thinking too much into that, but
well I maybe so because I'm wondering if that's who that's actually who he is. You know how that's what I'm getting at is like I can't he has this outward appearance of being very tough and like he can take on any challenge that comes at him, like any combatant. He wants to go to war. He's saying all these really tough things, but then you see him in these like vulnerable moments and you're like like maybe that's not who he really is.
no, I'm fine with that. I think it's just as vulnerable as they showed him, like too much. Like they should have been dialed back a bit more. Um,
I mean,
a
maybe.
bit a bit, but at the same time, I understand like he, in a weird way, viewing her as a mother figure. I did
Yeah,
think that it was unnecessary for them to explicitly state, at least for him to her, that he didn't mean to kill Luke.
yeah, it wasn't that interesting. We didn't.
We didn't. It was already knew that it was
Yeah,
unnecessary, and it'd
it's
been
better.
more interesting if he would have said all this to his family.
Well, it would have. Yeah, like I agree. I think we've actually talked about that before. That it's like it is. It's yeah. Like he obviously. I think what they were going for was that he is more comfortable talking to her than anybody else. Like his family sucks, and like that's something that we see in this episode in particular. Um, Allison, like I don't want to get to her totally yet, but like, and we've talked about it in the previous season, like the the correlation between Allison and Rhaenyra, like the two of them, and like the things that each one of them do, and like how that affects everything else around them, and the show is very big on like the parentage and how like that affects every generation after that. There's quite a bit of that going on, which I think is really really interesting. And I just yeah, I think that to some degree you're probably correct about that. Like it was just a little too overt in the way that they handled that because we already knew that he at minimum we knew it was an accident in the fact that like he didn't have control.
Yeah,
And the question of like it's more of the question of like how does he really feel about it afterwards? And I think we got that answer. Well, it's two things, right? Because if it's true that he's kind of putting on like if it's true that Aemon is essentially just putting on an act for his family, and that in reality he's basically just the same kid that he was back when like he used to get teased by everyone, and that he's
yeah.
not this great warrior, and then like the whole thing with like his dragon is you could say I don't want to know I don't know if undeserved is correct, but it's kind of like not as big of a thing ultimately as it's made out to be. It's interesting for a character, and that like face to face with like real combat and like real experience, he probably doesn't stand a chance. At least that's where my mind is right now, and like I'm waiting for the show to either convince me otherwise or really like dig into that. So
Yeah.
I just don't know yet. But he's from from like kind of a maybe like a superficial standpoint. I think he's kind of interesting. I mean, he's got like the ruby in his eye, and
Yeah.
he kind of seems like someone that you really wouldn't want to mess with. But like most of that seems like it's just on the surface because he feels the need to like hide that away from everyone.
And it seems like he's been a bit forgotten about as far as his character is concerned in the first
So
two episodes.
far, yeah, he hasn't
Not
played a
that
center
much
role yet.
development. Yeah, but I do agree with you. I think it would seem like he would be a character that would be imposing when in the camera, kind of like Damon is in every scene. But it just really hasn't happened this season so far yet. But speaking of Damon, though, that scene of them at the table, and they're talking about who killed Harris,
Oh, yeah. We can jump to that real quick.
and he freaking Rainey's looks at him, and his eyes just like move ever so slightly across to look at her. I don't know why, but that scene cracked me up. It's like, why does Rhaenyra's like, why does everybody think I killed Jaehaerys? Even my own cabinet thinks that. Why would anybody think that?
His
silent.
Yeah, he's like right here, and the way his eye just kind of darts around. Yeah. Matt Smith is definitely one of the best actors in the show. I mean, we've talked about this in previous seasons, or in the previous season, but like it just puts everything he's got into this character. I think he really, really has been enjoying.
It's right there.
Enjoying playing him. Yeah, right there. and
you know he wants to grin too.
Yeah,
you can see it. It's so bad, but
it shows,
cracked me up.
It shows one of the strongest things about the show still, and that is that when they don't, the Aemon thing, like for the most part, that stuff, it's forgivable because it's rare enough that it's like, okay, whatever. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't ruin anything. It's just like, I would have just preferred if you hadn't done that. Like, just, have him talk about something else, or like, because I think, and I was thinking about this today. I think when you're vulnerable in the position that he's in, one of the things that would have been potentially a little more interesting is if it's like he still doesn't really want to talk about himself. Like he's opening up, but there's still things that he feels the need to stay guarded about, which is mostly like him. And so maybe he talks about his frustrations with his mother, or like his frustrations with his brother, and things like that. But he's not going so deep as to being like, well, this is how I actually feel about this situation or whatever. Because it gives you insight into the way that he thinks without the exposition being so explicit about everything that's been going on with him. I think you can kind of glean a good bit of how he feels and his insecurities or his frustrations or whatever without, because people do that in real life, where it's like their frustrations are like the things that they're opening up to with someone that they're close with. A lot of the time it's like it would be about something else. Like he does that with Kristen Cole in the first season when they're looking for his brother, and they run into her actually. He has like a conversation, and it's pretty, it's something that he probably wouldn't tell a lot of people, but he's like, yeah, my brother took me here, years ago or whatever. And, it's like that seems like a pretty natural conversation. Like you're in that moment, and he trusts Kristen. And he's like, yeah, this is where my brother took me or whatever. And you can tell that there's like a frustration there. Like he doesn't tell you everything. He's not like, here's exactly what I was thinking and what I'm thinking now. It's very much like you can see like he's very uncomfortable with the situation, and he's not as like gross as his brother, for lack of a better. He is like, innocent's not the right word necessarily, but you get what I'm saying. Like he's a lot more reserved than his brother is.
Yes.
Like I don't mean it in a political sense, but he's more conservative. You're right. He is smart. He's definitely thinking through situations, and he's clever to a degree. So I guess really the question is ultimately like, how clever is he, and what does that look like when he gets put into like a life or death situation?
Yeah.
So because he has
pragmatic but emotional.
As far as I'm concerned, he hasn't faced anything like that yet, and it's not like his basically his opposite, which is Daemon, who is brash, angry, but has a lot of experience in combat.
Yeah,
a lot of experience in fighting with a dragon.
Daemon's issue is more so his emotionalism. Like he's very emotional, but pragmatic.
He's impulsive. Yep. And that's we talked about that last week, because it's something that Viserys always saw in him and Rhaenyra. And it's interesting because the showrunners, one of the things that they said, because I always watch that thing like after the show or whatever, because I'm curious to see like what they're talking about. And again, this week there was quite a bit less of it being like socially charged, if you will, unlike a lot of the stuff that they were saying in the first season. But one thing that they said that I thought was interesting was that they see Daemon and Rhaenyra as basically like the same person in different bodies. So like their characteristics and who they are and their connection, like they're so close to each other. And it's something that I think is potentially a hint for like things to come with Rhaenyra specifically. Because I guess we can talk about it now if you're cool with it, but like
Yeah.
so far this season, she has not. I mean, I think that Emma D'Arcy is like an excellent actor. I just feel like Rhaenyra has been doing nothing this season so far.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's kind of
And
like
I thought that scene with the old chick was kind of lame. 'Cause it seemed like the more like within the world of Westeros, right? We're not bringing in our morals to it, but just like within the world, it seemed like they're trying to make us like Rhaenyra really, really, really hard.
because I think
and it-
she's gonna do some pretty heinous stuff later on, and I think they're trying to like
probably.
because she's just
We're
kind
being
of
very heavy-handed though with it, which is
yeah
fine. Like it's working and it's smooth, but it just seemed like with the Whisper lady or whatever her name is,
the White Worm. That's what I
the
usually
White
call her.
Worm.
I know
Yeah,
she has an actual name, but I just can't remember it.
that she would have handled that situation differently and not just been like, I'm gonna let you go free because you brought me down, you were part of the plot, or at least helped and supplied information plot to bring me to get me off the throne, and then B, you're also part of the plot that killed a little boy.
Yeah, and then
So you would think it would have been prison or no, you're not leaving.
I thought basically she's gonna be like, you work for me now.
Yep.
Like you don't have a choice. Like you are basically going to run information for me or whatever, which I think is still going to happen. I just don't think they went the forced route. Yeah, I agree. I think that they are in an effort to not currently paint Rhaenyra in a bad light. They're doing a lot of stuff that I think kind of makes her boring.
Yeah.
Like she's
agree with
lost. One of the things that was so interesting about her early on in the show was the sort of like the impulsiveness. In the same way that Daemon is impulsive, she is also incredibly impulsive. And now all of a sudden that seems like it's switched off.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, okay, and what's so funny about it, dude, is that like I've been enjoying watching Alicent a lot more this season than I have Rhaenyra, which was quite the opposite from season 1.
See, I like Rhaenyra in episode 1, and I didn't dislike her in this episode. I liked her in this episode too. It just seems like
the only standout thing she had for me in that first episode really was her interaction with Jace, which I think was good. But I think in comparison to a lot of the stuff that's been going on with Alicent, Rhaenyra's just she's kind of been there. You know what I mean? Like
I'm sorry, just Damon's look with to Rhaenyra when she's like, "Can you believe this? Who would do this?" And he just looks at her like, "I have no idea." And then the reality sets in there. Yeah, like even though along with that train of thought, her acting out of emotion, they set things up for the audience to see. Like you can certainly understand where she's coming from with her losing Luke, right? When she walks into her cabinet and says, "I want Aemon," but you would think she would be forward thinking, realizing that you have Daemon there who's bloodthirsty and is just waiting to jump.
Yep.
So she's not completely absolved of it. Granted, I know she didn't think that was going to happen, but you got to be wise.
It's not completely convincing to me because she's known Daemon for forever, like pretty much her entire life. And yes, she had this like impulsive moment, but what the thing about it, and maybe it's something that just she will come to in a later episode, and I'll revisit this as we get further in the show and be like, yeah, she started out and I was kind of like, but like it's actually made its way into something much more interesting as the season goes on. What I'm just saying right now is after 2 episodes, Alicent has gone through like an insane amount in 2 episodes. So much stuff's going on with her, and like so much is being like solidified with her about like her relationship with her children, and like even in the beginning, like her being like, oh, the gods are cursing us over what's happened, and just like there's all of this stuff going on, and like someone pointed it out in Nerdrotics, maybe it was Ryan, but he was like, she basically leaves her like weeping son to go have sex with Kristen Cole at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Like she's basically got like
Terrible
heartless.
mother.
Yeah, but it's like it's interesting. Whereas like
Yeah.
Rhaenyra has basically, and they've been saying this. They're like, oh, she's been sitting around a castle, and I'm like, yes, exactly, guys. She's been sitting around a castle. Like I need, like, if she's gonna be doing this, there's got to be some character development going on with her, and like the most that she's done so far has been like, Daemon, I can't trust you. And then she had that moment with her son, which I don't want to take away from, because I actually thought that was really good. I just like I just haven't been connecting yet with her character this season. Yeah. It's just been kind of like, yeah, okay, she's here, and like, obviously there's a lot of goodwill from season 1. And I understand that like they're having to set up a lot, and like they are focusing on some other characters right now. And she, to a degree, is kind of taking a back seat at the moment. But yeah, like even with the loss of Jace, I'm just like what are you gonna do? Like you still that doesn't totally leave your mind just because Daemon struck back in a way that you were not happy with.
Right.
So I don't know, man. I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit, because like it's nothing against her. Like I think that Emma D'Arcy has been doing great. And the interaction she does have with Daemon in this is great. And the two of them play off of each other really, really well. But she is definitely,
their chemistry is good together.
It's very
for
good.
Sure.
Yeah, they absolutely nail it. So it's definitely interesting, and I'm curious to see like where it goes, regardless, with the two of them. Their relationship is something that's one of the more interesting aspects of the show, for sure.
Agreed.
Right. Let's see what's next. Okay, so Daemon leaves. That's all we get of him this episode, which kind of sucks.
Probably gonna get more of him in the next episode in
Harrenhal. Yeah, I think a lot more. They were showing a little bit of that in the
preview.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you a question, because I don't know if you watched the after the show thing with this interaction between Helena and Aegon. What was your read on this?
What was my read on them? Like
the two of them. This situation, like they're married. They just lost their like their 4-year-old or whatever was just murdered. And this is like the only interaction I think they have in the episode, really.
Yeah, I think you pick up on the distance and the coldness, more so, I guess, on his end than her end, between them, that resides between them. Because going from last year to this year, you can see he doesn't really care for her.
He doesn't really care. Yeah, it's a marriage of I can't remember the word.
Isn't that his
convenience
sister?
Or yeah, it's his sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite weird. You know what's weird? The way that it was described in the after the show thing was that there's like this connection between the two of them. Like they're the only two people that understand each other in this situation, and that's not the read I got off.
No,
of this I landed. I pretty much landed exactly where you were, because you watch this and he passes her, right? Like he comes down, he sees her, he like side eyes, right? And as he's walking by, he looks at her and stops for a second. I know I'm kind of hopping through this a little quicker than the way that it works, but they do kind of like sort of slow down, stop for a second, and then he just moves on. And I'm like, dang, that was really cold. And then the showrunners are going, well, they're the only two people that really understand each other in this situation.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what? And like her expression, like, yes, Helena has problems, but like she's clearly heartbroken, and she at this point it seems like no one really cares about her, right? Like she feels
Yep.
like this came off to me as feeling very isolated from everyone. The way that they had like she, she's on her own. Like even in this moment right here, oh, she does have her handmaidens back there, but like they spend quite a bit of time right through here where she seems like she's by herself, like completely alone, and then her handmaidens are like right behind her like that. All right, let's talk about Chris. Let's talk about Chris and Cole. Where are you at with him so far?
The actor's doing a great job playing just a like character you love to hate.
Oh, dude, absolutely.
Like it's so easy to be like, yep, he's the villain of the show.
Oh, he has got to be the most unredeemable character at this point.
Yep.
I don't know.
And then obviously his hypocrisy. Is it Eric that he?
Eric, yeah.
Yeah.
Eric. I never, for whatever reason, I never caught on to the fact that they were both named Eric. One of them it starts with an A, and one of them's an E.
Yeah, but I think it's Art. Is that how his name is pronounced?
So
they still pronounce it Eric.
Eric. It's like Eric and Eric.
Okay.
If that, because I knew someone their name was Eric, but it was with an A, and they went with like Eric.
Yeah.
And it was funny, man, because I saw this, and for a minute I went, "Ooh, is Kristen gonna have some sort of like change of heart? Are we gonna see him move in another direction?" And then it's like 2 minutes later, it's like, "Oh no, not at all, not at all. He's still just a scumbag."
Yeah, he is, and he, confronts Eric about his cloak not being washed and looking neat and everything, which is just obviously projection of his own hypocrisy of him not being pure any longer and completely doing away with his integrity as a person.
Yeah, it's absolutely projection. I think it's still great. Like Kristen went from being someone that was like they kind of messed up in the first season. I'm enjoying. I think at this point, like I have sort of gotten over episode 5 from season 1. And I told a friend of the show, Jake, I told him that what it is that at this point you kind of have to put your own headcanon in there about like what ultimately caused him to go in that direction and how he somehow managed like with everything that's been going on in the show and the way that like Kristen really didn't get in trouble for murdering that the Knight of Flowers, and has continued to basically fail upwards as a character. Like he kind of earned his place originally as a Kingsguard because he did really well in that tournament. He was impressive. He starts out as like a pretty likable character for those first like 4 episodes. Like he's not like brilliant, but he seems to be pretty kind. He seems to take things seriously. He actually cares about Rhaenyra. And he just has this thing where he's like, man, I really care about her, even though I'm not supposed to be like sleeping with anyone. Regardless, like it's kind of an interesting like piece to his character, and all of a sudden he just becomes a psychopath, and it's like, yes. It's still a complaint.
It happens so fast.
Yeah, it's still a complaint for me.
Same, because it just his whole. I get what they were trying to do, but it seems like the whole thing with Rhaenyra wouldn't like.
It was rushed.
I don't know, man. It just seems like too much for him to hold on to a grudge for that long.
There needed to be more to it. Like it needed to be like most multifaceted. So it wasn't like what probably would have worked is if there were other pressures that he was facing, and the thing with Rhaenyra is what just made him snap on the Night of Flowers. Maybe someone maybe like that needed to go on longer. I mean, it's at this point there's no reason to like dive back into that like fully. But there definitely needed to be a little bit more so that when he snaps, it's like, oh crap, he shouldn't do that. And then when it happens, you're like, yep, totally understand why that happened. Whereas the way that it kind of went down, you're like, wait, why is he doing that? Like, Rhaenyra caused him to do that? Like, I mean, dang, dude, I get that, like, he really cared about her, but, I mean, and it wasn't even like, they didn't even set up
Seems
him
a
being...
bit much.
Yeah, because they didn't set him up being unhinged. There's not really any indication of that in the first 4 episodes of season 1. All this time that he spends with Rhaenyra, all the times that... Really, every time he's on screen, he seems pretty straightforward, pretty smart, except, obviously, he's young, he's impulsive, Rhaenyra is attractive, and, that whole thing, it all makes sense, but then, it's the explosion in episode 5, right? I think 4 or 5.
Yes,
I think it's 5.
Somewhere around there.
I think it's the wedding episode essentially. It's just a little weird, little like, huh?
Yeah.
And it wasn't even what it was too is it wasn't just that he got in a fight with him, it's that he smashed his face in.
Yeah.
And it's just very weird. And but they have kind of played off of that because his decision to send Eric to Dragonstone is impulsive. It is something again where he's like he's not thinking properly through a lot of these situations.
Exactly.
Just Otto's like really great later on in the scene where
so good.
That's probably my favorite part of the episode.
Honestly, dude, we could really spend 3-4 hours breaking down each episode easily.
I know.
And talking about it.
But yeah, I'm despite some of those criticisms from season 1, I am enjoying watching the direction that Kristen Cole's headed in.
Yes.
He's one of those man, it's so funny though. It's like, and I hope they keep this up because I know he's gonna eventually something's gonna happen to him. Like, there's no way he makes it out of this show alive. That'd be nuts. But his downfall is something that I'm like very invested in.
Yes. He's got those psycho eyes.
He does, yeah. So it should be really interesting. And I would say that, and maybe this is just a personal thing, but this whole situation with him, if I was Eric, I would have been like, nah, man, I'm done. Like, sure, I'll go to Dragonstone, and I just would never come back. Because and so maybe that's like, I don't know where that lies. Like, he obviously is very honorable. He's trying to do the right thing. Honorable people in Game of Thrones have a tendency to end up dead. That is just kind of the rule of the world, is that if you're not willing to play the game to some degree and you're not smart enough or clever enough to understand your station and what you need to do in order to make things happen properly, and you're not as worried about your neck as your honor and other things like that, you have a tendency to end up dead and just a footnote to history, which is unfortunately specifically with this brother what ends up happening. I mean, we know what happens to both of them, but that's more his journey than it is his brother's. So they go through that. Let's see. We get this little... Whoops. Gotta be careful. I should have cut that part out. We get a little interaction with Jace and... No, sorry. Yeah, this is Jace, sorry. And do you remember her name?
Ayla?
Ayla?
Is that it?
I think that's right.
Let's see.
The two of them haven't been in the show a whole lot this season.
Not yet. You're right.
I think you're right, though. I think it is Ayla.
Bela, I think that's
Bela.
I think that's, yeah.
Okay. The troll room can always correct us if needed. Pretty nice little scene. They're betrothed to each other, and they're talking about things that you typically wouldn't say in front of anyone else. It just works. I'm curious to see. I like Jace. I'm hoping that he gets a little more screen time throughout the rest of the season to develop him a
Agreed.
little bit more.
He's like the new Rob.
He is,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? You know he's gonna die
yeah,
a death he doesn't deserve to die. You're like, no.
yeah. It's gonna suck. I think, unfortunately. It's. I think we all sort of know that it's because ultimately, like House of the Dragon is a tragedy.
Yep.
Like it is. This family, killing each other, murdering each other over, things that ultimately someone early on could have stopped.
Yeah, easily.
You know. All right, I'm gonna try to jump through. Okay, so here we are. Had to jump through the. Oh, actually, you know what I'm gonna do real quick? I'm gonna hide
tell
that.
me.
I'm gonna hide that, and we already talked about the Aemon scene. I was just trying to jump over that because I didn't have time to cut it out of the recording.
The edit.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I guess that we are talking about is this guy. Whoops, hang on. I had a good shot of him. Who
I
was
believe in you, David.
I just like it's just like full on nudity on the screen. Be like, sorry, YouTube. Um, this is the only scene we get with him. We don't really have to talk about this long because I already kind of mentioned it. But the blacksmith from the previous season,
Yeah.
the previous episode, he talks with Aegon about getting supplies so that the blacksmiths can make weapons for him. And we just get this little scene where they're like, he has a sick daughter, and it was just kind of like, okay, like, okay. And it doesn't really.
It doesn't really fit. It's a bit odd.
They do that, and then it's gone, and I was like, oh, okay.
I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to show kind of how the small people, the small folk of King's Landing are becoming, and so the hardships they're facing.
Yes,
And
agreed.
it really is, bringing home that reality of the small folk don't really care who's in charge, even though those in charge really made their lives miserable.
I think placing of this in the timeline of, like I said, of episode 1 and 2 could have been better. And the same with this scene with these two characters who we haven't spent a whole lot of time with yet. We only get one scene with Corliss and her name's slipping my mind. What's his name? Rhaenys, thank you. They kind of have a little conversation and about Daemon and Rhaenyra, and that's about it. And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked about, like you were calling it a mixed bag. I think the middle of this episode is kind of that. A lot of the stuff with the White Worm and Rhaenyra, it's not the most useful time spent. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if we're getting a whole lot out of.
It's more like out of this interaction.
Yeah. So it's like you get you get that scene with Aemon, and then you get the blacksmith. You get the two sailors who work for Corliss, and then you get the stuff with Rhaenyra and the White Worm, and it's all kind of like set up to some degree, and like, I mean, like they're still acting like it's not awful. Like I'm not miserable in it, but I'm just, you kind of look back at it and you're like, I don't know, I'm not sure. Again, because I don't know, like Rhaenyra seems like she's making the wrong choices with her, like you were saying, and I'm not really 100% sure what I'm supposed to be thinking about all that, because a lot of the time when you're watching the show, you're like, okay, this is interesting. Like, why are they looking at each other this way? Like, what's going on in like different people's minds? But like like some of these interactions, they just sort of seem like it's supposed to be set up for later on. So they just kind of pump a lot of setup right into the middle of this. We get this dragon flying overhead. Which is obviously like something that's going to be set up for later on in the season.
Yep. Whose dragon was that? Was that old dude that, quote unquote,
Ye-
died.
yeah, the one that they quote unquote killed.
Yeah,
Laenor. Yeah,
Laenor. That's it.
allegedly that is his dragon.
Yeah.
Because there are
Allegedly.
allegedly because there's still quite a few dragons that are riderless and or wild. We get this whole rat catcher scene. So a lot of we didn't really talk about the funeral procession, which kind of precedes this, with Helena and Alicent.
Yeah.
Um,
It was a bit. Yeah, I was expecting the close up shot on the kiddo.
yeah, I think I would consider what they did like the right choices as far as like the way they handled it. You know, it's not gruesome, but it's getting the point across to what was going on.
Happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think we already knew.
And I know some people who have argued that they wish that it was more gruesome, but I think that I think everything was handled properly with that.
I disagree.
The one thing I do agree with is that there's like the thing that happens to because it's like blood and cheese, you know, from the end of the last episode. Them cutting away from Aegon killing blood was weird.
Yeah.
That you know, because you're kind of on Aegon's side in that situation. Like, yeah, you murdered his 4-year-old.
You
like,
totally get where he's coming from, and you
yeah.
would think they would have,
held on it. I mean,
stuck with that a bit.
Considering what they did with like the Night of Flowers in the first season, like that's one of the I think probably one of the most gruesome moments in season 1. Just like the brutality of it, and I was sort of expecting that to at least be something similar here. And so I will agree that there are moments where it does feel like they're like holding back their shots with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But well, let's give it time. Maybe it's a build up. Maybe it's a build up thing.
Hold their
yeah.
their hand with, like, it makes sense, and in some cases hold their hand back a lot more. But then in other cases, maybe you could. I don't necessarily hate them cutting away, because again, like I think like I can use my imagination. I don't necessarily need to see the blood, gore, specifically the gore. But at the same time, I would understand it. You know what I mean? It's not one of those things that's like, oh, I'm gonna turn my head and be like, yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, there's a difference.
You could have at least left it at a couple of shots. You know what I mean? Like 2.
Sure, and like, because when Daemon cuts off Corlys, I can't remember his name, but his brother, he cuts his head off, or like,
yes,
at like the mouth or whatever, and he's like, you can keep your tongue. Like there's stuff from season 1 that you're like, I don't know, y'all. Like
stands out.
Yeah. You're like, that's just kind of weird. Some of the punches that you're kind of holding back from in this season, at least so far. And like, we'll give it some time. Maybe they're trying to kind of continue to like build on everything. Just a little weird. Anyway, so yeah, they do the funeral procession. It's supposed to be something that helps, dude. When the little cart gets stuck, I thought that head was rolling off. I thought they were. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When it's like at the very end and they're stuck and they're like, heave, heave. I thought it was rolling like right into the crowd, and then they cut away from it. I was like, okay, so we're not doing that. It was like, yeah, that probably would have been almost like borderline comedic for them to do something like that. Anyway, so we get the information from Blood. Not only he gives up Damien like right away, which is really funny. The guy that like acted so tough, and then the second like the torture tools come out, he's like, it was Damien. It was Damien. He did it. Gives up that it
needed to be done.
Gives up that it was a rat catcher, and then that leads us to this where and I guess I have to be kind of careful for YouTube showing this. Well,
yeah, I wouldn't bother showing
here's
it.
the dog. Here's the dog. We can sit on the dog for a little bit. Oh.
Yeah, basically,
here we go.
Aegon orders all the rat catchers to be put to death.
And so we'll talk about in a minute sort of the fallout from that, which is great because I love that. Not only will we probably get to see like the small folks reaction, and we get to have that conversation with Otto where like he has just had enough. Like he's just so sick of it, you know. He's trying and just can't seem to get through to his grandson. And of course we have this little moment with the dog, so loyal despite getting kicked in the ribs in the previous season. Or excuse me, I keep saying season, but I mean the previous episode.
Episode.
Yeah, and it works. It works really well. Just as that added touch, and then that pretty much goes right into Otto, in probably my favorite scene from this episode, where he's kind of like lost it. You know, he's not holding back. Probably an issue. I think one of Otto's problems in the series, it's one of his weaknesses, is that he's like clever, but he's not as clever as I think he would like to believe that he is. His mouth actually gets him in trouble, just in the sense of like it was the same problem that he had with Viserys, where he didn't know how to have like tact in the way that he handled certain like delicate conversations, and didn't have and honestly what it is he might be impatient, right? He wants certain things to be a certain way, and he wants the king to respect him and listen to his counsel, and then like so often it seems like it's falling on deaf ears, and so he just continues to get more and more frustrated, and he's not clever enough in certain instances to either like take the time or know the right things to say, or to like know how to properly butter someone up, and then the right moments to have that like sharp tongue. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. It works in some situations and it doesn't in others. He's obviously done very well for himself because he's been hand for a very long time, on and off, obviously, but like he has made a pretty much a lifetime career out of that. So he's done stuff right, clearly, but we do get to see that like he is impatient. He doesn't always say the right things when he needs to.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's very temperamental. He's different than, it's obviously made the comparison Tywin Lannister.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
and
Tywin
there's
being very much more calculated and forward thinking and reserved.
And it's like, he doesn't like so Tywin, for instance, one of the things that he's like really well known for, is that when you like basically usurp, you wipe out the entire bloodline, because then no one comes back for revenge.
Yep.
And that is something that Otto understands, but it was always it's like always been a half measure with him. So like he got rid of some of the people that were loyal to Rhaenyra in episode 8 of season 1, but he didn't kill Rhaenys, or pretty much any, he didn't wipe him out across the board. He didn't move quickly enough to take out Rhaenyra on Dragonstone, or didn't have the foresight to potentially not have them go back to Dragonstone, so quickly. Like he had to be somewhat aware that Viserys was close to death.
Yeah.
And if he had played it a little more correctly, probably could have had them wiped out. Yeah,
easily.
Because Daemon may be a great fighter, but he's not invincible. He's not going to be able to stop like an army, essentially. So like it was possible that it's that thing where it's like half measures a lot of the time, it seems like. Just things that like he's willing to go a certain distance, and then things get in his way. I mean, like Alicent was part of that problem because she was softer. I think that's gonna that's clearly changing to some degree. I think she's losing a lot of her humanity as time has gone on. And again, it's one of the reasons why I like I said, I find her a lot more interesting this season, is her development from kind of being the goody two shoes to where she's at now. I think is quite interesting. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that there is an obvious comparison here with Tywin, and that it's just not exactly the same. Because the way he handles it, he does not have like total control in his anger in this situation. He's losing really in this. He's a great actor,
Yes.
but he's losing in this situation because you can see how calm both Aegon and Kristen are at this point. Who's actually in control? And you have these little looks, right? It's stuff like this where he's calling him like a petulant child, and he's saying all this stuff to him, and Aegon's not lashing out. It's old Otto over here that is. So it's quite interesting the way that works.
It is very interesting.
But yeah, probably the best scene. I think it's really funny too when he's like, "Sir Kristen has acted,"
Yeah,
and he's like,
he's done more the last hour.
I know. I
than
can't
you
remember. I can't. Oh, I think it's right here when he somewhere in here where he says it, and he's like, "What?"
Then he finds out what Sir Kristen's idea was, and he goes, "Gods be with us."
And his acting right here is so good, because he knows he's lost, and he knows his facial expressions are so like this is an actor, folks, and him kind of realizing that he probably backed the wrong horse.
Yep.
That's why.
Oh yeah, he was definitely realizing that in this conversation.
Yeah, that he's definitely made some wrong decisions, and that's why I'm curious. Like Otto is so interesting to me, and I'm so curious to see where his character goes to. That's the one thing about the show that it's like it does such a good job of having characters in this that you're like, okay, I want to see what happens to them next. I want to see where they're headed. What's going to happen to them? Like. What are the decisions they're gonna make, and like, are we gonna see some more like subterfuge or like something happen with a character where they're like, oh, I need to get Aemon off the throne now. It's like maybe I still need to back the Greens, still need to do this whole deal, but like Aemon's got to go. So I'm curious to see what's gonna end up happening with that.
Agreed.
Right. Oh, okay. So let's talk about the twins, and then we'll call it a night because we're a little over an hour.
Let's do it. What'd you think about it?
I think okay. So we have to start back with her. So the White Worm gets let go, and she's walking away, and for some stupid reason, Eric is wearing his full-on
Knight's Guard
gear.
And they just happen to run into each other at the right moment.
Yes, it's very lucky that she was in this position. Not only that, so I just think this was handled poorly, honestly. I like the end result, not fond of how the setup kind of worked for it. Not the Kristen Cole stuff, just up this point, So she's walking down, right, and she sees him, and it's like clearly it's clear. And to be honest, to some degree, it probably should have been clear to these other guards too. So
yep.
This guy,
Easily.
this guy. Not only that, but she clearly knows something's wrong. She can go to the two of them and be like, hey, something's up with that guy. He's like 10 feet away. Go stop him, and let's confirm that he is who he is.
Yep.
And this whole thing gets stopped. So I don't think they handled this very well. Now it's from what I've heard, it's different in the book. I don't know why they decided this was the direction they needed to go. When in the book he comes in regular clothes, and then changes, and then he just happens to run into his brother. I think it should have been more focused on the twins. And she probably shouldn't have been so involved, other than I don't know, she could have like put herself in harm's way for Rhaenyra. Like if they're trying to set up that like she's going to end up doing, like I think I talked about this in episode 1, she might end up being like the master of whisperers or whatever for Rhaenyra. If that's what they're setting up, or they're setting up some sort of relationship with her and Rhaenyra, there were better ways to go about it that work without having to do it like this.
Yes. Agreed with you on that.
And I
Ways that
think
would have made it
it's
make sense.
yeah. And then like this guy's like, "Huh, you're just like out here now? I thought you were inside." And he goes, "Yep." And he goes, "Okay, come on in." And you're like, "Hang on." Now, and not to mention, Joseph, that earlier on in the episode, they made it very clear that they were stepping up security on Dragonstone.
Yep.
So it's just like, I don't know. It's just kind of like obvious mistakes in the way that they decided to handle this. Like, there's no checkpoints. There's nothing. The other thing that's really weird about this, right? Excuse me. The other thing that's strange about this is that the twins look exactly. This is the problem that we have with the Acolyte, so we have to be accurate with this. It's a little crazy that the twins look exactly the same. Haircut, beard,
everything. You
armor.
would think somebody would have been like, let's make you look different from your identical twin brother,
Yeah,
which exists.
Like
identical twins exist, so
right.
that makes sense. But you would think they would be like, let's try and distinguish you apart from everyone else. Not only that, but during the fight scene, the other King's Guard that came in there and stuff like that, you would have think, Eric would have, been like, help me or something like that, and
yeah.
It would have been like, I'm the real Eric. We had eggs and bacon yesterday for breakfast. It's just something like.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad they didn't go that direction because I feel like you start getting into comedy when you do stuff like that. Like, I think that there was a way to handle this.
You know what I mean? Just something like more mature and thought out than just that.
This is what I would have done. It was obviously a mission that was like doomed to fail from the beginning.
Yep.
So I don't think he should, and because I don't know for certain, but I don't think in the book he ever actually makes it into Rhaenyra's chamber.
And I don't think that he should have in the show.
Right. What they could have just set this up. It could have been very like, you basically have them meet in a slightly open courtyard area and have them duel to the death.
Yep.
And it'd be this very much thing of like they can try to talk to each other, take a minute, the something like that, right? And then like maybe the White Worm like notices something and she goes to tell Rhaenyra, whatever the case may be. But there's a lot that I think could have been better for the build up to this, because it does sort of feel like the build up to this just wasn't quite as strong as it could have been. For one, like we were talking about, Rhaenyra's Eric, new haircut, shorter beard, different armor, and maybe like they just don't know, or like there has to be something going on there, right? You know what I mean? Like there needed to be some stuff that happened to make it so it's like, oh dang, when he's getting in here, like you're really like, oh, is he actually gonna make it? And then like in the book, they just randomly run into each other, and then you just have this fight. Maybe Rhaenyra hears about it and she runs out. Maybe the White Worm is the one who does that, and some sort of thing to help move along the White Worm wants Rhaenyra to trust her plot while letting it really be focused on the twins. And then you just have a big Game of Thrones duel that works out and ends the same way it does here, because I think it works really well. But you just have it play out just slightly different with the same kind of like end point in place, and I think it would have been a lot stronger. But overall, like I'm not super mad about it. It's just there's a lot of convenience in how he basically ends up in Rhaenyra's chamber in a lot of ways, like without any problems. I think one of the things Mahler was saying is that he wished that he had like run into a few people that were like, "Hey man, still on for so and so tomorrow night," and he's like, yeah, like having to make his way past people that are, he's obvious, Eric is clearly known, like I believe he's supposed to be Rhaenyra's Kingsguard, so it's like there should be something to it, and I wish it had been handled a little bit better, but
I agree.
Still, again,
but good fight scene though.
Yeah, they handled that really well. The guy, I think he's still helping out on this season. The guy who did this is the guy who did not the Long Night, because the Long Night's the bad one, right? Is the Long Night
Yes.
from? Yeah,
Yes.
maybe it is that guy. Like the guy like understands, I think, how to shoot action. Maybe it's just the directing of the action that he's not always as good with. Because like even with like Battle of the Bastards, like, because that's not the good one. It's the one of the guys that from Game of Thrones that did the big fight between the wildlings and the their names are slipping my mind. The guys that guard the wall. For whatever reason, it's slipping my mind. It's late.
Yeah.
But you know, he's done all right as far as like the action is concerned in this show. So I don't know, man. Like people get better. They get better as time goes on. So like I can't.
Yeah.
Because the guy that did, I believe the Long
Learning
Night.
lessons. If you learn from it, you get better.
Yeah, and he did the Long Night and he did the Battle of the Bastards, but he was the one who directed the action in the jousting in episode 1, which is great. So I don't know, maybe it's like that massive scale stuff, and I'm sure there was a lot of input from other people that makes that stuff a lot harder, because there's a lot of stupid. Though the Night's Watch, oh my gosh, yeah. Sorry, Jake. Sorry, everyone. I should know that. Anyway, yeah, I agree. I think that it's great. I think it's very tragic. It obviously seems like it's basically foreshadowing what's to come because this is Civil War, and I'm trying really hard not to get us flagged by YouTube for the violence.
Yes.
And then
the way he just falls on his sword.
Yes, and he apologizes because I'm pretty sure. So you can tell me if I'm wrong, and so can the troll room. But Rhaenyra's Eric gets killed, right? And it's the other one who came to kill her that apologizes, and then
no,
it's the other way around.
Yes.
Okay, so I was having a little trouble keeping up with who was who then.
Yeah,
in that
it's
fight.
hard. You got to really
because I've seen it twice.
Really pay attention.
I've seen it twice, and I was like, I think it's this way. I was like, because like, yeah, I mean, we could sit and break down the entire thing, but I think you might be right. I think it was he kills his brother and then apologizes to her, and takes his own life. Which I'll say that is the way that I would prefer that to be. It's more tragic that way because he wins and he protects her, but then he's like, this is too much for me, and it's very symbolic, I think, of what's going to be happening throughout the rest of the show. That we're hopefully going to get. It's in one of the trailers. I don't know if the line has been said yet in the show. But it's like there's no war more bloody than that among like family essentially, or among blood. So it's like it's going to get really, really messy. The people with like a lot of conflicting feelings about like essentially killing their own family. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see.
Yeah.
And I'm still here for it, man.
Same, dude.
I think that they're doing a great job with the build up. I know this episode's got some weaknesses. I don't think it's anything that is more heinous than anything in the first season. We still haven't had a Rhaenyra blasting out of the dragon pit moment.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is like I would consider minor for the most part. It's not really going to change how it doesn't ultimately change the way how I feel about like characters. It doesn't feel like anyone's really doing anything necessarily out of character. It's more just from a writing perspective of like they could have set these scenes up better.
Yeah, easily. All the
stuff with like Otto and Daemon and Rhaenyra and like everybody basically in rooms talking to each other, arguing, moving sort of like relationships around and showing us more about relationships. All that stuff is still excellent. So. And a good shot to end on where you're still seeing like you get a reminder that like Otto still was never super close to Alicent and that she was kind of something like she's a useful tool for him in the power grab,
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, that is it, man.
Awesome. Well, Joseph, it's been a pleasure as usual. And thank you to everyone who has listened to episode 177 of The Underground. We just finished talking about House of the Dragon episode 2. It's called Rhaenyra the Cruel. We'll be back next week with episode 3, which
Oh no, the following week.
Oh, you're right, because you're out next week. Okay. Dang, we got to talk about 2 episodes, bro. You better set some time aside when you're back.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah. Okay, so we'll be taking off next week, but we'll be back the following week talking about episode 3 and 4. Well, at least that gives me a little extra time to go through those. And again, thank you guys so much for listening to the show. And until next time, y'all take it easy.
See ya.